All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas Podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee. Also here in Knoxville, Tennessee, although the background might lead you to believe otherwise, that he's in Boston, Massachusetts. But no, John Pennington, the founder, host of Sports Source here in East Tennessee, is joining me for the first time on this very program. John, good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Doing good. Thanks for having me. Yeah, the Boston background, it's my favorite place. So on all the walls around me, it's Boston paintings, Boston memorabilia, and that's just a huge mural of my favorite street in Boston, Union Street, right next to the Union Oyster House. So if people are sitting there going, why does this idiot have a background of Boston? It's actually just part of his room in my house that's kind of Boston centric.
There you go. What's your favorite street in Knoxville then? Are you in, like, are you an Old City guy? Are you a Gay Street guy? What's your spot?
That's an interesting, probably any of the Market Square area now. Now, if you asked me when I was your age, it would have been anywhere in the Old City. So Jackson and Central. But nowadays, the Market Square area is really nice. It's impressive how they've blown that whole area up. And Gay Street, too. That was, when I was starting out at WBIR in this town, we were all just desperate for some sort of downtown nightlife, and it just never seemed to spur. So missed it by about 20 years, but it's impressive what they've done.
There you go. And they're going to keep adding, man. Like, we're going to have the waterfront coming over here. I'm amazed at what's going to continue to pop up around downtown Knox.
Yeah, I mean, that ballpark's going to open up that whole corridor. I mean, they never should have. I was doing another show with Mike Keith, broadcaster of the Tennessee Titans now, many years ago, and John Wilkerson was also on that show, and we had the general manager of the Smokies on at the time, and he was pushing hard to get Mayor Victor Ashe and the city of Knoxville to fund a downtown ballpark, and they didn't do it. And they said ballparks don't bring in business, so they moved up to an off ramp with nothing at it in Kodak City, and boom, now there's restaurants and shops and everything around it. So I think when Randy Boyd gets that stadium downtown, it's going to really pump more energy into that whole corridor from Magnolia all the way over to Gay Street and the waterfront. It's going to be beautiful.
It is. I will say, though, I love the cabin feel for Smokies games out in Sevierville. Like, I go to a lot of them with my wife, and there is something about it of getting out there and kind of that minor league baseball field, where the downtown field is going to be a little bit different for Smokies games, I think.
Yeah, you've got that natural amphitheater.
Yeah.
Which is very nice. But at the same time, as someone who lives in North Knoxville, it's going to be easier for me to get downtown than it is all the way to Kodak.
I'm in North Knox right now, too.
Oh, really? Oh, it's a shame they can't put a single A team up there in Sevierville. Keep that one going. But anyway, that's I am not a lifelong Knoxvillian, but this has always kind of been the hub in the middle of the wheel. So kept an eye on Knoxville even when I've been out of here, and it's cool to see what they're doing with the city.
Absolutely. Is it harder to do Sports Source in March than other months, or no?
No. What's funny is the easiest months for me, and it depends on what you're talking about with easy. I only have 90 minutes a week. We used to be 60 minutes, and it's amazing looking back how we squeezed everything into an hour because I can go to 2 hours now. But we're at 90 minutes, and when you're 90 minutes a week, I mean, that is so easy. I have guys on my show like Jimmy Himes, Josh Ward. It's like, you got to fill 20 hours a week, and that's what you're doing. They have to fill. I have to weed stuff out. We have to be moving at all times, and there's only so many topics you can get into, and they have to be topics that people won't flip away from. So we have overnight ratings in TV. I know what people watch and what they don't watch. So for me, it's not terribly difficult in the summer months. People always say, oh gosh, what do you do in the summer? And it's like, well, we talk Tennessee football. We can have big generic discussion topics all summer long, previewing the fall, talking about greatest games ever. Vol fans eat that up. I would, if it were a Patriot show, I would eat that up. So I actually find that the summer months are easier. It's a little harder in the football season because I'm the only guy in town who hates night games because I will be up till 5 a.m. trying to show together. We don't just wing it. I mean, there's a ton of graphics and all that kind of stuff that have to be built and put together, and planning how the show goes. It's kind of interesting how that goes. But basketball's not tough. March isn't tough. A month I don't like, though. I don't like February because you're in the middle of basketball season. And Mark Pankratz on our show, who's from Chicago, always points this out. Down here in the South, we view basketball as football. So fans expect an undefeated season. They lose their mind after a loss. So every week you've got 2 games, and it's just up and down this roller coaster. And you want to say, man, they look good last night. And then you're going to get emails on Wednesday when they lose saying, you idiot, they suck. And then if they lose on Saturday, you say, boy, they look bad yesterday. And then they beat the number 1 team on Wednesday, and everybody emails and says, you suck, you're an idiot. So February gets a little old for me. I'm glad that we've hit March and tournament time is here. I hate the way the Vols are having to roll into it with the Zakai Ziegler injury. That's just Tennessee fans have to feel cursed at this point. But March is not a difficult month for me. March is kind of fun. That's reinvigoration. And then, we're only 2 weeks away from spring practice. And once you're talking spring practice, it's right around the corner till SEC Media Days. And then boom, we're off back to football.
Yeah. And I guess too, the way I was looking at it, it's interesting because like when you said people are like, oh, what are you talking about in the summer? I'm like, y'all don't know the South at all. Like the summer is like preview central where it's just everyone's just they're salivating over any crumbs of like where we're going to go, what the season can be, because optimism is just at the full boom of like what we can be. Like just wait for the Joe Milton's actually going to go number 1 overall next year. That's July in Knoxville next year, depending on how spring goes. And
no matter what the projected record is going to be, come August, it goes up by 2 wins.
Yes.
If somebody said, well, they're bad, they're going to win 3 games. By August, I think they could win 5 games, get to a bowl.
I think they're going bowling, actually.
Yeah, and if this year it's probably going to be 9-3. I guess is the predictions that'll be coming in. And by August, it will start being, I don't see any reason they can't go 11-1. They outperformed last year. Why can't they do it again? Yeah, and it's like that. I mean, you've got that in Alabama, you've got that at Georgia, you've got that. It's the same thing at Florida. It's what makes this league so fun. I don't think now my show is kind of, I always joke that it's in the Goldilocks zone. They always talk about that with finding planets that are far enough away from their sun that they're not radiated and overheated, and yet they're not too far away to where everything's ice. So it's the Goldilocks zone where you could find life on these planets. My show is done in the Goldilocks zone. In terms of, you would have to have a place that the people are nutty enough to follow all year long, a Sunday morning sports talk show on TV. And they've supported us for 20 years. We just finished our football season. You'd have to be in a place where they're crazy. So now you're in the South. That's it. You'd have to be in a place that has a big enough TV market to where you can make good money off of it, or money. You have to be in a market that's small enough to where you can afford to buy the time on the television. That's the trick. You don't want to work for another station and be able to get fired one day. You want to have your own time. So there's really, across the country, I'm looking, maybe Lincoln, Nebraska might be crazy enough and the right media town the size that you could get away with it. I lived in Columbus, Ohio. The fan base up there would eat something like this up, but it would be way too expensive to do. So this whole South is the only place where you could do a show the way we're doing it about a college team. And if you did it somewhere north, I watch shows out of Boston, and it is, okay, you've got the Celtics, you get the Bruins, you got the Patriots, you get the Red Sox. They don't talk college, but you've got those 4 that are always going. Down here, it's football, basketball, football. And you
just have little breadcrumbs, like Nick Saban this week just saying, like, I don't think it's fair about playing Tennessee or LSU and Auburn and our permanent 3 rivals. It's like, oh, perfect. That's fodder for the whole, like, that's it. Tennessee fans are going to eat that up. They would love nothing more than talk about Saban as he's now scared of Tennessee after losing this year and everything. Like, that's just,
it's there's always something to set it off. And the other thing that's great, we've done it a couple of weeks here because it's just on everybody's mind, and that is, what's the new schedule format? How are Texas and Oklahoma going to fit in? What's that mean for Tennessee? Now that you've got Florida State's Board of Trustees talking about something's going to have to change. Oh, well, then forget about the 2036 grant of rights. Let's just dig into how it's going to break down. The ACC is going to collapse any minute now, and who the SEC gets and who the Big Ten gets. And that's exactly what we did this last Sunday on my show. Yeah. We did a couple of segments on, all right, if it fell apart, who goes where, which schools would be appropriate for you. So it's always something. And yes, it can be something as silly as a coach making a comment in a press conference. And, it's special. You don't have that in a lot of places.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's wonderful to do it here. And the show is somewhat easy to do. Again, the reason I like the summer months is because I can do more creative topics, I suppose. And it's not the time crunch of, all right, the game ended at 11:30. Now you got to work 7 hours to put it together, and you're not going to get to bed and all this other stuff. So to be in a place where you've got the fandom that you have here, huge plus. Huge.
So what's your coffee intake like on Sunday mornings in the fall? What are we looking at here, John?
Yeah. I don't do a lot of coffee, actually.
So you're ready to go.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about that. I probably would be better off if I drank the coffee. You can tell, it's not he's gone from a good host to a bad host. He goes from a bad host to a worst host. You can tell, oh boy, he must have been up late last night because he's fumbling.
I don't think anybody would guess that. I guarantee you, if you ask most Tennessee fans watching Sports Source, they'd be like, he has someone doing that. He's not up until 5 a.m. putting it all together and all. I bet you they don't see it that way. They don't see the grind.
Well, this, and I salute you for the work you're doing and putting on a show like this for as long as you've done it. It's not easy. People think you just sit down, flip a button, and boom, you're talking. I mean, you're working. You are working at this to make your own outlet the job and make it profitable. It takes time and it takes effort. People watch my show, and it's funny. I'll have people who will stop me at a grocery store or something, and they will say 3 things that we said the previous Sunday. They'll lay out, boy, when you said this, and when Bob said that, and when Justin said this. And then they'll always end by saying, hey, I'm going to call you this week. We haven't taken a phone call on that show since 2007. And I know they're watching because they just quoted everything back to me about the show. But it's just this overall, they take phone calls. They're one of those shows. And I think a lot of people just think we sit down and wing it.
Yeah.
And it's after a football game. I don't know that you want this, but after a football game, I will have a yellow pad that I'll sit there. And, we got guys who are at stadium. We got Sterling Henton who's on the sideline. But we got guys in the stadium, press box, fans. I've got a Safety Systems, one of my sponsors, put a nice big system for me here at the house. So one of us should be watching on TV so we can sit there and clearly get, his foot was on the line. The refs were wrong about this. You need somebody with that angle. It's easier for me to do that, and I don't have to fight the traffic after a night game coming home. So I'll watch it here with a yellow pad, and I'll come up with about 7 or 8 pages of legal pad notes during a game. And then you have to figure out, let's weed these down to the top 15 topics, basically. Over 90 minutes, we'll try and get 15 things in there. And if I can drop in a line, okay, this isn't a 5-minute discussion. This is a blurb I can throw out. This is interesting. We need it in here, but we don't need to discuss it. So I kind of separate things into 2 columns. Then you lay it out as, no, these are the segments. These are our 9 segments. Here's what we're going to do. Then you realize, okay, I've got Overstreet, Henton, Marlon Walls, Daniel Hood, and Justin Hamilton on there. Well, some of these guys are going to answer questions, in different ways than other guys would. Some people just have a better, like when we had Justin Hamilton, who's gone on to coach the Titans now. He was defensive coordinator in the ACC last year. He had a level of knowledge that was ahead of even my other former Vols who were on the show. They knew their position, and you kind of got to know the opposite position of you. He had to know every position. And so for him, I could throw out these questions. For this guy, I throw out these questions. So what I'm getting at is, it's kind of this big game of Tetris. If you've ever seen Tetris, you put everybody in, you know how many segments each guy's going to get there, because I'm not having them drive in for a 90-minute show and just do 10 minutes. So I got to get everybody a certain number of segments. You want to put them in the right segments for them.
Mhm.
Oh, wow, this is a tough question. It's a giant esoteric question. Hodge will be great because you never know what he's going to say. Boom, I'll put him in there.
Mhm.
Chuck, an overboard fan, pure, everything's through orange glasses. The Vols are robbed by the refs. Let's get him in there.
Mhm.
And then you know that takes time. That's probably
Yeah.
an hour just figuring out these are the topics, here are the guys, and how I'm going to lay it out. Then you have to figure out, does this segment flow into the next segment?
Hmm.
Is there a natural tie here? Because you don't want to jump from one thing, especially when we're doing football and basketball.
Mhm.
I don't have 2 segments of Mark Pancratz and then 3 segments of football and then back to Mark Pancratz. That's not fair to him to sit around.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of work. And I'm not trying to make myself a martyr. Don't get me wrong. I'm not minding coal.
That was just
But
real. Like, this
yeah,
is just
it is.
honest. This is what it takes.
Well, it is. Yeah, it's a lot more difficult than people think.
Yeah.
There's a lot more. Better way to put it. There's a lot more that goes into it
Yeah.
than people think. And here's the deal. Be a jerk of me, but there are some people who just sit down and turn on the cameras.
Yeah.
There are some people who do that, and I think that I'm glad to say we've been number 1 in the ratings for a long, long time. So
Yeah.
I think if you pour the work into it and you try to be honest, which is our number 1 goal, then I think that there are rewards that come with that, and fans will appreciate that. They may hate you this week, but they know they'll like you next week, and they respect the fact that. All right, I'm mad at him because I didn't like him saying that, but he had somebody else on who said the opposite, which is another reason we have, anywhere from 6 to 10 people. I mean, that's during football season, we'll have up to 10 people on the show, which is just maniacal. That's nuts. I'd have a retirement fund if I didn't do that, but that's the kind of show I want to produce. I want people in East Tennessee to say, "Oh, that's network level. I'm going to hear from, all these different opinions." But there's a lot that goes into that I don't think people understand. So when you get into the summer months, it's easier. It's easier. I don't have to juggle 10 guys. It's 4 guys. I know what we're going to talk about. Boom, let's lay it out. So then the only difficulty is making sure you come up with something that fans at home do want to hear you talk about.
It's also a discussion show. It's not a debate show. And so much of it now you see on television, everybody's just like trying to get their take out, and just it's really loud, and it's really just like really obnoxious. And yours is more discussion based, and everyone talks, like no one talks over each other on Sports Source, which I think is an important part of any good talk show or podcast.
There was a show that I grew up watching. This will show how old I am. It was called The Sports Reporters on ESPN.
Yeah.
And Dick Schaap was the host. And it was all the guys who once started on Pardon the Interruption years ago. Mike Lupica, Bob Ryan, Rick Thielander, the classics from the big city newspapers. These guys would be on this show, and they'd sit in Times Square, and it'd be a topic, and it would just be 4 guys or 5 guys. The very serious, fun discussion. It was not one thing I hate is, hey, I'll take this position, you take that position, and we'll argue it. I hate that fake argument stuff. If we have a segment on my show, and here's the thing, it's interesting. There's a lot of agreement on my show, and people think, well, it's because you make them say what you. It's like, I'm not gonna. I don't think I can make Jimmy Himes say. I don't think I can make Josh Ward say something he doesn't believe. But because we all come at it, except for Chuck, we all come at it as media first and not fans. And there's a reason I want Chuck out there. There's a reason I want Sterling out there. So you get that perspective. But since most of us come at it from a serious, impartial kind of spot, our views often align. And I've always felt that if you get 5 guys in a segment and they're all 5 telling you something, maybe you should listen to that. Maybe that in itself is telling you something. Now, it's something you don't want to hear. People don't care anyway. But I do not want to ramp up fake arguments. I don't like that. They're fun when they come around. If you get a natural disagreement, that's great. But not an over the top, in your face, yell at each other, fake. The whole. If you could take Skip Bayless and Shannon Sharp and Stephen A. Smith and all of, it's 4 or 5 of those guys. If you could take them and just launch them to the moon, sports coverage would be so much better in this country.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need the fact that these guys are yelling at each other, over a third down call. It's like, look, I'm a human being. I doubt you really care this much. This is put on. It's an act. It's annoying to me, but they make more money than I do. So there are people out there who want it. Those aren't people who are going to like my show though, because we don't do that. I'd rather we have fun, but at the same time, it's more of a, as you say, just a serious kind of a discussion show. It's not the argument show. And that's pretty much what ESPN started that, where it kind of turned it into a game show.
Yeah.
Pardon the Interruption's a game show, and
it's more of a performance.
Absolutely a game show.
Yeah.
And just kind of everyone looked at that and said, oh, let's do that. It's easy. So everyone does it. All these regional cable networks. I used to be the SEC guy on a network called CSS down in Atlanta.
Yeah. Very familiar with that.
Yeah. And then there's Comcast Sports. Well, it's now NBC Sports Boston, which I watch religiously. And you've got SNY out of New York. They all have these same kinds of shows that just kind of off that ESPN model. And I sit around and wait for the 6 o'clock show, which is more of a news/discussion show. So the show is kind of what I want to watch. And luckily, with the fact that we've been supported for 20 years and we've got the ratings, I think most people kind of want that. It's the Twitter thing. Everyone looks at Twitter and thinks that's a perfect representation of the world. It's like, no, that's about 20%.
Yeah.
And 2% of the people are making all the content. The research shows this. So literally, we're all just in an outrage and listening to these over-the-top nonsense takes from this tiny sliver of the population. And people think, that Twitter's where it's at. And a lot of shows have become Twitter-esque. That how can I be cute and ugly and hot takey at the same time? And I just think there are plenty of people who, 80% aren't on Twitter, you know? And I think there's a giant silent majority, as Nixon would say, of people who just prefer good, honest coverage. Give me honest coverage.
What's the biggest change you've made? And then we'll do some rapid fire questions to wrap up here, John. What's the biggest change you've made to the show since it first aired?
Going from 60 minutes to 90 minutes was huge. And then this past year, when you do something for so long, every time we changed the set, it has changed the show. We went to we used to be, it was Wayne's World, man. It was Wayne's World early on. We were making stuff. It just looked laughable. We then got a really nice set built for us by the client, and it was wood and copper and stone. And the desk was kind of this Nike swoosh shape. And because that, everyone sat in a line down from me. So the show became more of a, I don't want to say it was game show like the ESPN, but game show in terms of I ask a question, guy next to me answers, then the guy next to him answers, then the guy next to him. So then that drove me crazy.
Yeah. Kind of like Family Feud when Steve Harvey's just going down the list one at a time with the family. Yeah.
That's exactly what it was. So this year, this past summer, I invested in a brand new set, and boy, we won't be doing this again, but that was put together, and I'm really happy with it because it gives us different areas to do things. You can have a little 2-person discussion. You can have a demonstration zone over here, and the guys are more in kind of a U shape to where the conversation is natural. They're not having to look down a row to see me. They're looking straight across at another guy.
Yeah.
And we're all kind of in this U shape. So the biggest changes, set changes, it changes the dynamic of the show. And then going from 60 minutes to 90 minutes was just a massive step forward for the show. That was really a takeoff point.
All right. We'll do some rapid fire and we'll get you out of here, John. I want to be respectful for your time here this afternoon.
This is flown. So if you want to go an extra 5 or something, you can. But
okay.
If not, cool.
All right. I'll give you one more kind of bigger one and then we'll do the rapid fire.
All right.
What is the toughest segment to parse through? If you had to parse through all the different kind of segments over the last few months, what's the toughest one? You're like, all right, how am I going to get this in this amount of time before another break? Is there a subject matter? Is it what is the toughest for you?
That's an interesting question. I guess it would probably depend on, do you mean topic?
I just imagine like just the blocks, right? Like you have these different like when you go in, when you're putting the show together the day before, you're like, man, I don't know how I'm going to turn to Josh or I'm going to turn to, and I'm like, I still don't even know if we're going to get this at 6. Like, I don't know. Like, is there a risk? Yeah.
The toughest topics are usually it's the first one.
Huh.
The first one, and the reason is that should be just the big reaction. That's what I plan it after football, after basketball. It's just, okay, guys, what are our biggest takeaways? What are the headline? If you're writing a headline for this game, what is it? Well, here's the thing. Those, if the game is boring, those can die and it's quick, which changes my timing for the rest of the show.
Yeah.
Or if it's a great discussion, I'll let it go long, and the rest of my show, every segment is going to be, okay, let's be quick. Boom, 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 boom. So really that first segment is probably the toughest, regardless of topic, just because I don't know what the guys are going to say.
Yeah.
And we haven't timed through it. So if they say a lot, it could really slow down the rest of the show. If they don't say a lot, well, that's kind of a bummer of a first segment. And you wonder if that's going to hurt ratings or not. So that first segment is the one that's kind of, it controls the mood and everything else for the rest of the show. Now I will say this in terms of, let me go the opposite way. Favorites, having Justin Hamilton there, and I knew he'd get back into coaching, and I knew he wanted to get the NFL too. But the 4 months we had him, I knew he wasn't going to be around long. So I'm like, I'm going to ride this horse. So we would get together.
He was your Jamal Lewis.
Oh yeah. We'd get together once or twice a week somewhere. And we'd sit down and spend like 3 or 4 hours, and it would go on. It was just a discussion. It would go here, it would go there, it would go everywhere. But we would gradually put together, all right, Justin, I want to ask you this. And he'd give me a detailed answer. Guy's brilliant. So he made my life easy. Great communicator. But he would lay out this. And I would say, all right, now half the people on my show are going to get that. Half the people watching the show are not. And we would work at it back and forth to where we had a complicated concept broken down as simply as you could. I would tell him, let's break it down so my mother would get it. And yet at the same time, it's complicated enough and it's important enough that people aren't going to tune out going, yeah, we know this. So those kinds of segments were fantastic to produce. Those are my favorites. So I'm going to miss that, having a former defensive coordinator from a Power 5 school who was in it last year. I mean, that was godsend. That was manna from heaven. So.
Interesting. Who is the dream? We'll get into our rapid fire here. So who's your dream VFL that you have never gotten or had a chance to speak with that you would love to have on the show that you think would be great on your show?
Well, it's Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning would be great. I mean, Peyton doesn't do a ton of the Knoxville stuff. In terms of the local media in town, but he's great in every setting. I mean, he's tremendous. He's a guy that you could just sit down and say, here's the mic. We're all going to sit over here and just listen to you go for 90 minutes. He would be the best to ever get on there. I've already had my dream guy.
Who?
Stanley Morgan.
Years
ago, somehow he was in Knoxville. So I lured Stanley Morgan in there, and former Vol quarterback Bobby Scott, who was a tremendous, he'll bust your balls. I'll watch language, but what Bobby does. And he came over in the first segment with a handkerchief and wipes down my forehead in front of Stanley Morgan and says, "You're getting a little nervous here in front of your idol." He really took me down a notch. But that was a lot of fun having Stanley Morgan there. And his introduction was probably 8 minutes because I went through all the things he should be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, all his records at UT and everything. So technically, I've had my dream guy. Here's another dream. If I could get Bernard King and Ernie Grunfeld, same show, that would be cool. But that's I was in New York this past week at a Knicks Celtics game, and Bernard King happened to be there. Got a huge round of applause. But I wish we could get him back to Knoxville more often. I wish we could get him to do some live media.
Yeah, that would be good. Cromp's my guy of anyone I've talked to here. I've talked to Dobbs, I've talked to Cromp, but Jonathan Crompton's hilarious. Like, that guy is open. He is an open book and will tell you all about it, like the Kiffin era and just what he thinks about Heupel and everything else. But he's such a brilliant quarterback mind and offensive guy, and you see why he was a 5-star and everything else. But Cromp is one of my favorites. I don't know. Has he been on Sport Tours before or no?
He has not. One of the things we've got is we do a cattle call once a year. I want people who can be regulars
Yeah, he's not in the state anymore. Yeah.
So we used to do an all VFL show before football season. Like the last show of my year begins with UT's first game. That's the way fiscal year. And the last show of the previous year would be that last Sunday in August. And I would have like 6, 7, 8, 9 VFLs. It was an all VFL show. And it was basically a test run for me to find new talent if I need. But we've got good guys. It's just hard to, how many of these guys are in town? How many of them aren't doing a ton of other media? I mean, that's the thing. If you get somebody and they're good, they're going to wind up somewhere else. Have them on 3 different places and that kind of thing. And then it's like, well, what's the value to me if somebody can hear you in these 14 other venues?
Right.
Yeah, I'm always looking for new guys because these guys move into town, they move out of town, and when they get to a certain age, they've got kids.
Yeah.
Well, that changes what, are you available to me every Sunday? When you've got kids and you're coaching them and all this other stuff, that changes it. So I'm always looking out for new people.
How much do you love them? Are you willing to move on?
Yeah. Well, trust me, I don't have kids, so I'm looking at it like, really? It's a tournament. They'll get over it. Come do the show.
That's a fear of mine. If I have like the tournament circuit, man, I don't know if I can commit to that. Rapid fire here though. Joe Milton or Nico, who starts more games this fall for Tennessee?
Joe Milton.
How confident are you in that?
70%. I think it's Milton, unless if there's an injury that could throw anything out. But I think Nico looks way too small. I think the coaches liked Milton initially 2 years ago. I think they still like him. They're just going to coach him differently. I think he'll be good enough to get through what I expect to be an 8 or 9 win season. That doesn't mean you're taking a step back. That's just when you're building a program, it's like a stock market. You don't just, it doesn't do this. It does this. You're really growing. I think that next year is going to be fine. And I think Milton will get through it as your starter. We'll see.
I think the one I have circled is UTSA because UTSA has a good offense. They're going to put up points, and this fan base like I know this fan base. If it's 24-24 in the fourth quarter with UTSA, we're going to have some interesting conversations. It's also, Nico's an easy name to chant.
Oh, yeah.
It is such an easy, like I was in the building for Milton's game against Pitt, and I'm in the building for most of them, but like I love going as a fan. Like no matter where I go in media, I'm not going to go to a Tennessee game as media. I don't want to be in the press box. I want to be with the fans. It's just more my deal. Like I enjoy that more. But the Harrison Bailey chants were just deafening around me. And that's Harrison Bailey. No offense to Harrison, but like, with Nico, it's just going to be a completely different situation.
I just hope Nico isn't treated like Harrison Bailey.
Yeah.
Harrison Bailey came in, played a game, and it was like, okay, so he's not the answer. Let's dial it down. Let's see how these guys develop. I watched that Orange Bowl and phone with my guys, and we're all saying the same thing, and that is, Milton's not the guy. Then they take off in the third and fourth quarter. All right, Milton's going to be the guy. I don't know if he's going to be. I don't think he's going to be Henton Hooker by any stretch.
No.
I don't think that's his game. But I think he's good enough to get you 8 or 9 wins. So I'm reasonably 70-75% sure that he gets more starts than Nico. I'm just scared of Nico's going to get snapped in half.
Yeah,
that's a guy that I hope they're just feeding him steak and waffles constantly. Pizza.
Especially if John Campbell and Gerald Mincy are the left tackle and right tackle, where it's like if that goes wrong, that's the underrated part of this season is so many questions. Like Darnell Wright's out of the building, and Mincy and Crawford both got banged up a lot, and you might be in a situation where you're going to walk on Dane Davis on one side and
think about that. I mean, Henton Hooker, a lot of his runs were eluding pass rush,
and that's not Joe Milton at all.
No, he is not a guy who he can run.
But he's taking sacks. He did in the Orange Bowl.
He doesn't look like he wants to.
No.
To me, he looks like a Heath Schuler, Tim Tebow style fullback. If he wanted to pound over you, he could. Plus, he's got speed. But clearly, that is not his desire.
No.
So you're right. If the line isn't up to snuff, you could be seeing him take a lot of hits.
I hope it's not the case. I think we all want Joe to succeed. And I think that's the big thing. It's like he's going to have the opportunity. We all want it to happen. But we'll see.
He was certainly a good teammate, and the relationship between he and Hooker is pretty special. It's unique. So And he said great things about Nico, trying to take him under his wing and everything. So, yeah, you do hope that things work out for him.
Right now, Clairvoyant John, March 3rd. The 3 permanent rivals for Tennessee will end up being who?
I hope it is Alabama, Kentucky, and Florida.
Okay.
I'm tired of Vanderbilt. Kick them out of the league. They're useless. They've beaten Tennessee more than Kentucky has, and yet the Kentucky game is infinitely more interesting. It's a much more interesting game.
Yeah.
But my guess is it's going to be Alabama, Kentucky, and Vandy. I think they're going to get their 3 oldest. Heupel mentioned that last year once they passed a little thing around showing who would get who. And for all the talk, somebody's going to get screwed in this with their 3 toughest opponents, and maybe it's Alabama. But the deal is that's a third of your schedule.
Yeah.
And
also, you're going to play everybody every other year. Like you're going to rotate. It's going to even out.
Yeah, and no one's going to have an easy schedule in the SEC. Are you kidding me? The other 6 games are going to be made up. You're going to get Georgia and Oklahoma, or you're going to get Texas and LSU. I mean, it's not an easy league, and it's getting harder. So, if Tennessee winds up with Alabama, Florida, and Auburn, I'd be happy with that. But I'm big on tradition. Kentucky's your oldest rival. Keep them. Alabama is traditionally your biggest rival, and Florida is the biggest rival for the generation that came along right as I got out of school. I left UT right when it went to division play. So that's when it went from my generation, it's Alabama.
Yeah.
Everybody since then, it's Florida. I'd love to see both of those in Kentucky stick.
Yeah, I think it's Vanderbilt. I agree with you. I think it's Vanderbilt, Kentucky, and Bama. And I think that might upset some Tennessee fans. Like, it just kind of stinks, though, to think about, like, Georgia and Florida just not going to be on the schedule year over year. And also, Florida just has become the start of SEC play. Like, it just kind of is like, hey, this is real now. Like, this is the start of the season. But I'm also like, I kind of don't miss the cardiac situations of Tennessee, Florida at the beginning. Like, I may not miss that as much anymore.
Yeah, the interesting thing is, see, going back to when I was there at UT and my whole life watching them, it was Auburn and Ole Miss every year.
Yeah.
Auburn and Ole Miss. And I was like, everyone was like, you can't lose Auburn and Ole Miss. Auburn was that game. Auburn was the traditional big first game in the SEC every year. And the networks would come in here because both of them were top 10 in that Pat Dye, Johnny Majors era. So it was great. And I thought, what are you doing? We're stuck with Florida and Georgia. We've played both of those 20 times in our history. Who cares? So whoever you get,
you'll adjust.
You wind up, unless you're Arkansas and you have no ties to anybody in the league and it's been 30 years and you still don't have an honest to God rival. That's I hate Texas coming into the league because Texas is if you look, and I'm going to be, somebody will think I'm sexist, but put your own sex in here. If you look at a potential spouse, and you see, wow, they've been divorced 6 times. It may give you pause. Maybe it give you pause as to whether it will work with you. That's Texas. They've broken up every league they've been in. Teams flee to get away from them. So I hate them coming in overall. I don't think they're going to be a all for one for all kind of school like everybody else is. That said, I'm happy for Arkansas because they finally get an actual rival in the league.
And we get Texas A&M and Texas on Thanksgiving or the day after Thanksgiving back, which I've missed. Like those two not playing year over year. It's just been, what are we doing here, folks? Like they should be playing every year.
Yeah. And I'm just, everybody wants what it was like when they were a kid. And for me, Oklahoma, Nebraska was a monster game every year. You don't get that anymore. The fact that USC and UCLA are going to the Big Ten, it's silly. At least with Texas and Oklahoma, you can make the case that they're still,
like once you bring in Mizzou and A&M, it's like, what does it actually mean anymore? We got used to A&M and Mizzou, which is crazy.
Yeah, see, A&M, Mizzou was pure TV. Pure, we got to get a cable, and they'll do it. They bring us cable households. Texas A&M had been rumored to try and get into this league since the 80s. You've had the SEC go after them. You've had them flirt with the SEC. They fit. They're crazy. It's like a cult down there. Bizarre rituals and everything. Huge stadium. That is a fit for me. I don't know that Texas, Austin. I mean, here's the thing. Vandy is the only school that is not in a one-horse town. And I don't want to insult people in Lexington and Knoxville, but take the university out of that town. Come on. That's what drives it. Austin, Texas. That's a big enough city to where they've got their own thing. Now they're passionate, they're crazy, but it'll be interesting for me to see how that fits. And then you got Nashville, of course, which nobody in Nashville cares about Vanderbilt, so that's they need to be thrown out of the league. We can talk about who should come in. They need
Tulane, man, bring them back to the SEC.
I would love that because you get New Orleans back in this league. Let's go more games in New Orleans.
That would be fun, man. Tulane was my honest to God for years. I was like, it's Tulane. That's the answer. It's like, go back to the New Orleans market and put them in. And then my other thing too.
As an old timer, I would also like to see Georgia Tech back.
Right.
How can the SEC not have Atlanta in the league? Now, they left it on their own, and they don't add anything brand name or anything like that. Historically speaking, Tennessee's biggest alumni chapter is in Atlanta. It's an easy drive for everyone. I mean, South Carolina and Georgia Tech, Georgia Tech, Florida, Georgia Tech, Auburn, Georgia Tech. That would be a tremendous addition from a historical sense. But in terms of name brands, anybody listening to me right now is like Georgia Tech, Tulane. But I'm just thinking fit and travel. But you're right, especially now that Tulane's decent again.
Yeah.
If you could trade if Tulane could come in, bring everybody's GPA up, you could flush Vanderbilt, bring Tulane in, plus you get the road trips to New Orleans, which, come on, who doesn't like that?
Exactly. Final two here. Your favorite Tennessee sports memory is what all time?
Well, it's funny. Once I started the show, it kind of, people are like, well, you're a fan. I'm like, I was a fan. So you don't like them? I like them. It's just when I launched my show, they put the coach's show opposite me. They moved time-wise from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. They've since moved it out of there. Not to be a jackass, but because they got tired of losing. So when you go through that and, they've come in and said, you can't use highlights. It's like, what? Everybody in the world can use highlights. You can't. You're opposite our show. And they've taken some people off my show in the past and said, well, we're going to use them. And then they don't use them. They just took them off my show. Then it's a business. I don't dislike you, but it's hard for me to view you as a rah fan anymore. Plus, I don't like fan coverage. Everybody's different. There are people who want, oh, no, that's better coverage. I tend to think fans get a little too high after wins, a little too low after losses. I'd rather hear somebody that just pull it straight. So because of that, my favorite memories are all going to be when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I would say this is, I'll give you a Neyland Stadium game, and it was a loss of all things. I've been at great games. The 82 game when they beat Alabama, I was 10 years old, 11 years old. It's fantastic. But the best game I ever saw at Neyland Stadium, Notre Dame was number 1. Tennessee was number 9. Notre Dame won it, but Tennessee made it this wild comeback. It was the year before the Miracle at South Bend. Those were the two best, back then you would have some rival, some non-conference school come in and you'd play 2 games against them, home and home. Now, you may get just 1 game somewhere to neutral side or whatever, but that was the best 2-year non-conference swap I've ever seen because both those games were great. And Sterling Henton was on that team. We've talked about it. That game here, there was so much pro talent on that team. I encourage any Vol fan to go back and watch on YouTube the 1990 Tennessee Notre Dame game. Vols lose. My gosh, that is a classic college football game. That's probably the best memory. I wasn't devastated by the loss. I was kind of proud of the way they played. It was really cool.
I love it. Last thing we wrap up here, John. The nicest VFL you've met is who?
Ooh, boy, that's tough because Sterling. I mean, okay, it's tough, Sterling. Bobby Scott's up there too, even though he's a ball buster. Bobby's great. Everybody loves Bobby. Dewey Warren, another one. Everybody, that's a certain generation, but Dewey was always super nice around me. But I'll go Sterling just because what you see is pretty much what you get. I mean, that level of insane optimism and energy, he's got it all the time. Now, for all I know, he goes home and, sticks knives into walls. I don't know. He may be crazy. But somebody's got to have a release at some point. But he really is the honest to God. Anybody who ever runs into Sterling Henton anywhere, you don't have to worry about him always having a bad day. no, he's top of the charts in terms of nice guy.
I would like him on the hunt, just Sports Source, and the energy would just be so different. Than it'd be an interesting way to try and facilitate there.
Yeah, he there are times where I will talk to him and we'll be talking. So what's fun about the show is what goes on when the cameras are off.
Mm-hmm.
Those breaks.
When Josh Ward's yelling at everybody, just like, yeah.
So rotten. There's so many people there that just we've all got everybody's jumping in. Everybody wants to get their take in there, and you get 3 minutes, and it's usually I'm freaking out because something has gone wrong technically, and I'm screaming at that. But Sterling will occasionally he'll give an honest take occasionally off air, and then he gets on air and massages it to fit his persona a little bit more. I don't think anybody would be surprised by that. But occasionally, he is always optimistic. When I say he's always optimistic, he's always optimistic when he's on.
Yeah.
When the cameras aren't on, occasionally he'll give us an honest take. He's like, oh, yeah, this ain't going to happen. But most of the time, he's feeling pretty good about things. If I told him the Vols are playing the Chiefs next week, he'd come back with 5 reasons why Tennessee's going to win. So
there you go. Yeah. You need guys like that, though. Like, they're just like the optimists, and you need guys, the high energy optimist guys, come football season.
Absolutely.
Especially when it's tough. The season's not going your way.
The fun thing is, it's I've built the show for this purpose. We used to do a thing called the Doves and the Vultures, where we did 3 down, and it was Overstreet and Hodge, who were always negative, and Hood and Henton, who were always positive. I'm exaggerating, but that's kind of the way people view them.
Yeah.
I get so many emails after shows from and it's like this for everyone. Now I get a lot of hate emails. If you're in the media, you get a bunch of hate emails. But I'll get stuff saying, you need more guys like Sterling. And then I'll get emails saying, you need to get rid of that bum Sterling. Well, I've always thought that's the perfect guy.
Yeah.
50% love him and want more people like him. We want more people telling us we're going to win. We got 50 people saying, I want honesty. Okay, that's perfect. He's perfect. I get a lot of emails saying, you're always bashing the Vols. You're a hater. You hate the team. And then you'll get one you get a bunch that are, you guys are such homers. You take up your mouthpieces for the Haslams, your mouthpieces for UT. And it's like, well, I guess we're doing it right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you don't know if I always tell people, I'll give you the addresses of some of these people who've been calling me a hater. You guys get in touch and figure it out and come back and let me know whether I'm a homer or a hater. Kind of depends on the topic, which is honest coverage. But yeah, the Sterling energy, I know what he brings to the show, and that's why we put him out there. And I think anybody who is polarizing, and most of my guys, thank God, are. And probably anybody in the media is these days, but Sterling is so out there that I get a lot of that with him. And, that's why he's going to be there as a fixture for many more years, I hope.
There you go. Well, this has been fantastic. I appreciate you giving me so much of your time this afternoon, John. What do you want to plug here as we wrap up here outside of Sports Source on Sundays? What can the good folks check out from you?
Sports Source Sundays, 11 a.m. WATE 6, and you can watch it WATE.com. If they're not in the market, they can watch it live. WATE.com. There's actually a Sports Source page. You just go hit watch at the top, I think. It'll lead you down to Sports Source. And if you don't catch it there, we post it on our YouTube channel and on sportsource.tv every Sunday afternoon by about 3:30 or 4 o'clock. So depending on what time the Patriots are playing, whether I can get to it or not. But that's the main thing. People can follow us there. I don't tweet much. My only tweets are typically, here's a video of Bernard King at Knicks game, and then there's nothing for the rest of the week. And then it's watch a Sunday.
You're more of a TikTok guy, John.
I do a lot. I'm a big dancer. People don't know that about me. But it's funny. I used to do the CSS thing. I used to write a thing for the Sentinel. We used to own my buddy and I used to own a website called MrSEC.com where we covered the whole league. league and then the TV show. And then you hit a certain point where your doctors are saying, dude, you are way too stressed. I just cut a lot of that stuff out and much happier. One thing I found was I'm much happier when I'm not on social media. So you're not going to find me on Facebook. You're not going to find me on Twitter very often. 5 tweets a week, maybe. So watch the show, catch us online or watch it taped online. We got it there. Anyway, they can digest it.
Don't call in. He doesn't do that anymore. Folks.
Yeah, that's right. Then we don't do call-ins, but you're able to.
So don't, when you went into John in Sevierville, wherever, and say, I'm going to call in this week.
It's classic. It's classic. People will run through all the things we just said, what they liked, what they didn't like, and then I'm going to call you this week. Never understood. All right. But hey, they're still watching, so whatever.
That's the best way to end it. They're still watching. John Pennington, thank you so much for the time, and we'll have to check back in again soon.
Absolutely. We'll have to have you stop by our show at some point.
Let's do it.
All right.